It's February, and the corporate overlords have decreed that this month shall be a celebration of shallow commercial expressions of affection. So, what the hell? Let's do a RomCom fest. Welcome to the Octemberfest podcast. I am Jeff, your host and recaller of retro romance, and this episode marks the beginning of a new chapter of the cast. After the rousing success of Decemberfest and following the advice of a much more successful podcaster, I am pivoting a bit. Rather than sticking to strictly spooky stuff, I'm going to lean into my ability to cram an enormous load of cinematic detritus into my brain in a short time. So every month this year, I'll be doing mini-fests, 8 to 10 movies connected by a thread, be it genre or franchise or first name of the main character. Octemberfest will still always be my big event. The full month of horror isn't going away. But for the off-season, I'll be mixing it up. Some of these may be themed by month, some may just be stuff I want to watch. We'll see how it goes. But for today, I bring you a much requested category, the romantic comedy binge. There are a ton of rom-coms out there, and I needed to keep this corralled a bit, as I'm not dedicating a full month nor subjecting my psyche to 100 of them in a row, so I decided to confine myself to the work of 90s legend Meg Ryan. While she's throttled back in the acting since the early aughts, Ryan starred in about 20 movies between 1989 and 2001. I may have erred a bit in my selection process because 5 of the 8 movies I watched are rated fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, and most of them are considered good movies. This is an oddity for one of my binges, as complete fucking garbage makes up about half of my general consumption, and without the rot, I may struggle to muster the usual venom that rises when I recall this nonsense. I'll do my best. I'm sure something will piss me off. I struggled with my starting point for this set. Choosing the movies was pretty easy, but deciding the order for the series was tougher. Do I go chronological? Do I go by tone? Co-star? Director? In the end, I went with my gut, and it worked out pretty well. Without intending to, I laid out the movies roughly from most magical/fantastical to least. Kicking off with John Patrick Shanley's fairy tale, Joe versus the Volcano from 1990. Tom Hanks is Joe Banks, a Tom Hanks from a multiverse where he is trapped in a hellish corporate dystopia that makes all color wash out of the picture while zombie employees trudge to work over a crooked walkway shaped like the company's lightning bolt logo. Why does a medical supply company that makes anal probes and petroleum jelly have a lightning bolt logo? Because finding ways to sneak an anal probe logo into the rest of the movie would have been too hard, I guess. Anyhow, Forrest is miserable like all of his coworkers, but unlike the rest, he seems to notice that he's miserable. See, Detective Strebeck wasn't always a soulless corporate slave. He used to be a firefighter, but trauma from that job has pushed him into the wonderful world of catalog filing. His angst at being trapped here has turned him into a hypochondriac, sending him to endless doctors, not only to escape from within earshot of Dan Hedea's inane phone conversation loops, which are hysterical, but also to find out why he feels bad. So, shortly after arriving to his purgatorial employment, Joe is off to see a doc. Robert Stack, host of Unsolved Mysteries, tells him that all of his symptoms are psychosomatic, but he actually is dying. He has a brain cloud. And this is before the internet was really a thing, so it's not just something made up by anti-vaxxers to get in the way of 5G cell service. Dr. Mysteries tells him that he only has a few months to live, and suggests he live it up while he can. And then sends his doomed patient out in the street to hug a Great Dane, which is probably the best comfort in dark times. So, Josh Baskin returns to a dismal basement office with his boss, Frank Watusi, an overbearing, angry assword of a man played perfectly by Hedaya, and the first of 3 characters played by Meg Ryan, Dee Dee. He has a pretty good I quit rant, not quite half-baked, but solid, and he asks Dee Dee to dinner, which she accepts. This is the first of the Goldilocks trio that Joe will try on throughout this tale, and the shortest. They connect pretty well at dinner, but he scares her off when he reveals that all of his newfound confidence is because, for him, there are very few consequences. What with the whole dying in a few weeks thing. Shockingly, she opts not to get involved with a dead man walking, and leaves Philadelphia on his own. The next day, he's visited by the owner of his old employer, Lloyd Bridges, who tells him that he needs a hero so that he can make semiconductors. He offers Joe an all-expenses-paid vacation, ending with an extreme sauna session in the mouth of an active volcano. Not having much else planned, Joe accepts. After a fun shopping montage, accompanied by a very sage Ozzie Davis, Joe and his exceptional new luggage jet off to Los Angeles, where he meets his second Meg Ryan, Angelica, daughter of Lloyd Bridges. This time she's wearing a bad red wig. They have an awkward date. She reads bad poetry. He gives some unsolicited life coaching he probably shouldn't have, given the whole trapped in a horrible job until he learned he was going to die thing. But whatever. Strike two. No love for Joe. The next day, Joe heads to the dock to meet his boat for the final leg of his journey, dressed as Jane's father from the animated Tarzan for some reason, where he encounters his third Meg Ryan, Captain Pat of the Tweedledee. Over the next 10 minutes, possibly both real time and movie time, the two go from general animosity to deep attraction, as is the way in these stories, and then the boat sinks. Typhoons hate love stories, and apparently the sister from So I Married an Axe Murderer. Amanda Plummer is here for a minute before bravely going down with the ship. Tom and Meg stay afloat during the storm, though she gets bonked into a coma, and somehow the exceptional luggage doesn't get scattered in the waves and instead becomes a rather convenient life raft. This is no Titanic door. You could fit a family of four on this big bastard. Tom spends the next uncountable span of days nursing his unconscious companion and praying to the biggest goddamn moon in cinema while possibly losing his mind until, nearly simultaneously, she wakes up and they arrive at the island they were aiming for. That's lucky. The island-dwelling Waponi, led by Abe Vigoda, welcome them with orange soda and subject Tom to the weirdest fetish montage possible in a PG comedy, while Meg gets a very pleasant spa package on the island. Joe is led up to the mouth of the volcano, where Patricia declares that she loves him despite spending 90% of the time they've been acquainted unconscious, and asks him to marry her. They decide to jump into the hot pot together and get ejected by an angry volcano god, who sinks the island and frees the second best set of luggage in fiction, the first being Pratchett's, of course, saving our heroes who are now stranded in the middle of the ocean without supplies. This is a happy ending. All snark aside, JVV is charming, funny, colorful tale about courage, not just to vault into Earth's gaping sores, but to step out of uncomfortable situations and take control of your life. It has an odd tone and didn't really find its audience in the 90s, but it holds up well on rewatching. I think there's a lot of symbolism going on in this movie that I didn't catch all of, but visually it's pretty fun. Keeping the stars consistent, I went on to the movie most folks who were around in the 90s first think of when Hanks and Ryan are put together. 3 Sleepless in Seattle. Nora Ephron had already proven she can write comedy and romance, both with a little movie in 1989 and My Blue Heaven in 1990. But Sleepless was only her second directorial effort. Sucks to peak early, I guess. Tom is back, this time grieving his wife who was taken by cancer. Meg is back, this time engaged to Bill Pullman with poor constitution scores. After Tom moves his kid from Chicago to Seattle to get away from people giving him business cards for support groups, his son calls into a radio show during their Christmas Wishes segment, and a gender-swapped Fraser Crane guilts Hanks into getting real personal with evidently half the goddamn country who happen to be tuned into this particular radio show on goddamn Christmas. Turn that shit off and be with your family, people. Meg hears the segment and develops a parasocial relationship, which turns into full-on stalking situation when she flies across the country after using her contacts as a journalist to track him down. This is a world before social media when you had to do work to stalk your crush. While Meg's running around behind the back of one of the greatest fictional US presidents, whose big character flaw is that he has allergies, Tom is pushed into dating a woman who really should have been played by Fran Drescher. I guess she was busy. His 8-year-old kid, however, has decided that his dad should only date this crazy lady who sent him a letter because she mentioned baseball. Maybe he's onto something, because the kid has a girlfriend at 8 and Pops can't seem to get out of idle. So son of Hank sends a letter back to the crazy woman in Baltimore asking to meet her on top of the Empire State Building on Valentine's Day. Now, this is a batshit idea, and a good way to end up with your organs distributed through the black markets. But the kid decides that even if Tom doesn't want to go and meet this lady, he's gonna. So he and his 8-year-old girlfriend commit computer fraud using her mother's travel agency accounts and book a ticket to New York without telling any adults. Kid runs off and Hanks is forced to follow, where of course he encounters and immediately imprints on his stalker. This is healthy. I think they're on screen together for a total of 4 minutes. Love story for the ages. Sleepless is a good movie. The characters are well written, the dialogue is natural, and despite the insanity of the whole scenario, the audience is pulling for the couple that hasn't met. These characters do live in this magical world, however, where destiny is conspiring to bind these people, Final Destination style. There's also no justice for Bill Pullman, who's just a decent dude throughout. Ephron waited 5 years to give us version 2 of this story. But after a couple of disappointing theatrical releases, Michael and Mixed Nuts, she went back to what worked and brought Meg Ryan's back together again for You've Got Mail in 1998. Pro big box propaganda piece masquerading as a romantic comedy, this one has Tom as the middle aged Nepo baby of a bookstore tycoon opening a new store in NYC. They don't know they'll go under in 5 years when Amazon makes them obsolete. And Meg runs the small neighborhood children's bookstore around the corner. Along for the ride are a slew of recognizable faces. Parker Posey as Tom's soulless yuppie book publisher girlfriend, Greg Kinnear as Ryan's performative, bleeding heart intellectual boyfriend, Dabney Coleman as Hank's virile elderly father, and also Steve Zahn and Dave Chappelle are here, and terribly underused. This is where I need to pause a second and talk about the date movies I'm consuming here. In just about every one of these movies, modern technology would take all the fun and romance out of these circumstances. I'm about as romantic as a tire iron, but even I can concede that it's more meaningful to actually meet and speak to a person than to slide into their DMs. You've Got Mail isn't just an advertisement for a now defunct ISP who would keep its users beholden to their arbitrary moral policing while charging them to wait while the dial-up modem failed to connect for 30 minutes, also that they could check an email box filled with spam and download a single JPEG in 40 minutes. It's also a peek at the very beginning of when tech opened this dystopian social era. Anyhow, Hanks and Ryan are email pen pals in an age when messages didn't just pop on your phone incessantly, with a strict rule about keeping details out of their conversations. They've got a nice friendship over the internet, but there's a bit of emotional adultery going on as well, as both are with other people. Offline, Tom and Meg end up at odds, of course, and while they go to war IRL, they continue to bond online, until Tom discovers that his foe is also his pen pal. This is where things get a bit skeezy. YGM shows us some of the best and worst the internet can offer us. The best, Tom and Meg have an anonymous friendship through the internet where they can support and advise each other without worrying about judgment. It's a pretty pure and innocent relationship. The worst, Tom figures out who he's talking to and continues to play along online as though he didn't, using his knowledge to manipulate his prey. This is presented as charming in the film, but I think it's pretty sketchy behavior. In the end, the predator drives his prey into a meetup in the park, where she weepingly admits that she hoped he was her boyfriend from Canada. You wouldn't know him. And they settle into what is likely going to be a pretty dysfunctional relationship built on deception. Efren is really good at letting the soundtrack and performances from her characters carry a lot of very murky water. And despite being a pro-corpo, adultery, and online stalker apologist piece, You've Got Mail is still a feel-good romance. Oh, for some reason, Hanks's father and grandfather both have young kids in this. Some kind of statement about how rich old men just keep getting laid. I don't know. They don't go anywhere with it. It's real weird. Speaking of real weird, James Mangold, director of Girl Interrupted, 310 to Yuma, and Logan, but also Night and Day and The Wolverine, made a rom-com about time travel with Meg Ryan and Hugh Jackman in 2001. Hayden Leopold is strange in a very familiar early aughts way. The concept is simple and stupid. Jackman is the Duke of New York, a number one. In the late 1800s, he follows Liev Schreiber through a time hole under the Brooklyn Bridge and ends up in modern times where he meets and falls for a very edgy Meg Ryan, who gets past her plot-driven prickliness to fall for him as well and abandons her loved one's career and life in a time without cholera to quantum leap back to the days when electricity was new and she has no rights. Good call, Meg. Smart choices. Hope you like the smell. Schreiber, aka the guy who didn't kill Mrs. Prescott, plays Ryan's ex-boyfriend, who conveniently lives above her apartment and shares a relationship without boundaries with her and her deadbeat wannabe star brother, Breckin Meyer, who was really reaching for that role. Let's see what he's been up to. Oh, Robot Chicken. Well done, sir. You nailed it. Natasha Lyonne is also here, slumming it for a paycheck, I guess. She was in 6 movies in 2001. Actually, well done, ma'am. Bradley Whitford also shows up as Ryan's scumbag boss, continuing a tradition of scumbag roles going back to Scent of a Woman and Billy Madison. Guy really knows how to play the creeps. Kate and Leo is a decent but generic rom-com that feels more akin to Night Before Christmas than the rest of the stuff I watched here. It may be a Boise 7, but it's an LA 3. I'm halfway through the binge now, and I'm feeling kind of blah from all the lovey sameness and generic bland that was K&L, so I mixed it up with an old favorite, Joe Dante's 1987 sci-fi action romance, Inner Space. Meg Ryan's future ex-husband, Dennis Quaid, leads as Tuck Pendleton, a reckless, drunken, washout test pilot who is signed up for a top-secret miniaturization test. Tuck boards a ship that is to be shrunk down and injected into a rabbit for science. I don't know what the deal was with shrinking tech in the late 80s. It was a thing, I guess. Well, the experiment goes bad when a group of thieves raid the lab after Dreamscape gets shrunk, but before he gets him bunnied. One of the scientists escapes with him in a syringe, which ends up in the acid jack Putter, played by the legendary Martin Short. Putter's a bit reminiscent of Joe Banks of Versus the Volcano earlier. He has an unsatisfying life, is a hypochondriac, generally lacks confidence and purpose. Some science magic later, Enemy Mine and Only Murders in the Building are talking and trying to figure out a way to extract Mini Quaid before he runs out of air while avoiding thieves who need the microchip inside the microchip to make the micro machines repeatable. The rope and Tuck's on and off girlfriend Lydia, Meg Ryan, of course, who is for the second or third time in this binge cast as a reporter. I think I mentioned this in the Decemberfest cast. For some reason, female leads in romance movies seem to be reporters or writers way too often. Maybe get back to that later. The three amigos now assembled infiltrate the thieves' brunch and try to steal the MacGuffin needed to unmicro Mini Dragonheart. Jack gets captured, Jack escapes, Jack develops feelings instantly for Meg Ryan, because who doesn't? No one in these movies, that's for damn sure. Jack gets the MacGuffin back and saves Tuck. Jack gets friend-zoned, and Tuck and Lydia get hitched. That's the super short version, but this flick is in Dante's prime. Right after Gremlins and The Explorers, Inner Space is clever and funny and different and still works. If you haven't seen it, do so. If you have seen it, watch it again. This is another movie where the couple that ends up together is almost never on camera together. But this time it also happened in real life. Quaid and Ryan married in 91, had a kid who's now a pretty good actor himself in 92, and split in 2001. Ah, romance. Now that we're settled nicely into the science fiction portion of our slate, what with time-traveling Australians and micro-management, I figured it was time for one of the more obscure titles on my list, 1994's Forgotten IQ. Let me tell you, this flick is a pain in the ass to search the web for. Set in the 50s at Princeton, Meg is Catherine Boyd, niece to Albert motherfucking Einstein, Walter Matthau here, and some kind of math genius herself. She's bound to a miscast Stephen Fry, who plays against type as a misogynist shitbag psych professor who tortures animals and people and pretends it's science, and tells a very smart lady that she talks too much. What a cock. Tim Robbins is very tall. Oh, and he's a mechanic here, Ed Walters. Ed's pretty damn smart himself, but for some reason, knowing lots of shit and being able to fix engines doesn't impress the big brains at Princeton, and they constantly talk down to the man. He works alongside Frank Whaley, who you may recognize if you saw him. He's one of those guys, and the great Tony Shalhoub. So Meg and her British boob break down near Tim's garage, and Nuke has that whole love at first sight thing happen when he spots the girl. I don't know how he was able to make her out from up there. Seems like all that cloud cover would get in the way. Anyhow, he tries to track her down and meets her Uncle Al, who decides pretty quickly that this young mechanic is a better match than the spotted dick she's settled for at the moment. So he and his cadre of genius scientists decide to help him con her into hanging out. Somehow, this pack of brainiacs decides the best way to do this is to pretend the kid discovered cold fusion. That old chestnut. Things spiral out of control as they would, the Cold War gets involved, and President Ike pops in, and in the end, Stretch and Meg fall in love. It's not the most unpredictable script, and Ryan doesn't have the same chemistry with Robbins as she does with Hanks and Quaid, but the movie's amusing enough and probably deserves better than the bottom of the bargain bin where it seems to have been lost. I don't remember if I mentioned him by name when I was talking about An American Werewolf in London, but Griffin Dunn plays the lead's best friend and first victim, who hangs around as an increasingly damaged ghost for the rest of the flick. Dunn has more than 100 acting credits to his name. But in 1997, he tried his hand at directing a feature film for the first time, with Addicted to Love. Before I get into this, I need to talk about inaccuracy in film titles for a minute. Joe does not fight a volcano. Tom only mentions insomnia once in Sleepless. The having or not having of mail is central to You've Got Mail, but the flick could have been called Book Lovers or something, and not been an AOL shill. The least accurate title in this set here is Addicted to Love. This flick features a couple of folks who are out for revenge against the ex-lovers who jilted them. They're not serial daters, or nymphos, or junkies who love each other and heroin in equal measure. They're just pissed because their others dropped them in bad ways. And while the title is intended to call up the Robert Palmer song, and does, I've had that shit or its Weird Al parody rolling around in my brain all week now, it doesn't really fit the flick. Regardless, Addicted to Love stars Ferris Bueller opposite this month's feature actress as Sam, a small town astronomer with a special kind of autism that makes him real good at predicting shit, and yet still emotionally accessible enough to woo Kelly Preston, and convince his crew of space nerds to drop whatever they're doing and point his big space spyglass at a nearby school every day at noon so they can watch her wave for 10 seconds. Preston gets an opportunity in the big city and fucks off to NY for a couple of months. But instead of returning after her stint in the bigs, she decides to hang around and breaks up with War Games via a Dear John letter read aloud by her father in what has to be one of the most awkward moves possible. Send a fucking text, lady. Damn. Simba decides he isn't going to just let her get away, and realizing space isn't going anywhere, he packs his shit up and runs to find his lady, only to discover she's moved in with the French dude from The Patriot. He seems like a real piece of shit in this flick, but it's okay because he's good at sex and that's what matters. While he's gawking at the couple through the window of their unreasonably large New York apartment, someone on a motorcycle nearly runs him over. I know from other romance movies, this is an indicator of compatibility. After avoiding death by meet cute, Sam spots an abandoned building conveniently located across from the ex and her gigolo, and he sets up a squat so he can spy on them because stalking seems to be a staple in romance. Is this what I got wrong? I'll add it to the list. One night, while he's obsessively documenting all of their moans or some shit, the mysterious motorcyclist breaks into his homeless shelter through a skylight because rappelling is more badass than using stairs, and reveals themselves to be Meg Ryan, with an even edgier haircut that she had in Kate and Leopold. She's a photographer this time, goes by Maggie, but you know how we do here. Meg declares that she's moving in. Turns out Frenchie is her ex, and she wants vengeance for getting kicked to the curb. Over the next few weeks, or months, or years, movie time is weird, who fucking knows, the spurned pair bond while scheming to break up the happy duo across the way, and in a shocking twist, discover they love each other rather than the old flames. I mentioned earlier that I'm moving from most to least fantastic romance. This seems like a good place to pause and explain my theory. Joe and Patricia know each other for a couple of days on a boat before suicide pacting into a hot rock. Annie and Sam spot each other in passing a couple of times, speak for 30 seconds, and we're supposed to get happily ever after from this. Joe, again, and Kathleen are magic together through the internet and just gloss over the whole ruined family legacy thing. Though, to be honest, this one doesn't quite fit the scale because they do spend time together both in person and online. Kate, again, and her time traveling Duke spend less than a week together before she decides to risk polio to be with him forever. These aren't real relationships. These are weekend flings at best. None of this is sustainable. This is instant love at first sight magical nonsense. Lydia and Tuck have been together for a while in inner space, and Tuck's adventures in Jack, as well as a surprise kid, show him it's time to grow up and they take the next step. That can work. Ed courts Catherine for quite a while in IQ, and while the relationship starts with lies, they've worked in honesty by the close. Sam and Maggie spend a lot of time living together before giving it a go as a couple. I think those kids can make it. But no one spends as much time developing their happy ending as my last couple, Harry Burns and Sally Albright. The late great Rob Reiner gave us a masterpiece of film in 1989 with When Harry Met Sally. Not a simple romance tale, this story takes our leads from college to jaded 30-somethings, developing as friends and individuals over the decade and change we follow them. We begin with a pair of fresh college grads. Billy Crystal is Harry, a sarcastic edgelord who spits grape seeds at moving vehicles, and Meg is Sally Albright, an uptight prude who wears days-of-the-week underpants except for Sunday because of God. They meet through a mutual friend and drive from Chicago to New York together and just don't click. 5 years later, they collide again, sitting in adjacent rows on a flight. They still don't click, but Harry has gone from man horror to engaged, and Sally has settled into a reliable Meg Ryan career of journalism. 5 years later, they meet again, in a place that doesn't exist anymore but is central to a couple of these stories, a bookstore. They connect over failed relationships and click a bit, and then spend the next year growing closer until sex ruins everything. But in the end, their bond is strong enough to withstand the awkwardness, and boom, love happens. Bruno Kirby auditions for his City Slickers role as Billy's bestie with a wagon wheel coffee table, and Carrie Fisher makes an appearance as Sally's Samantha. I think I'm using that right. It's a lot harder to talk snarky about movies I love, so I'm keeping this one short. Crystal and Ryan play perfectly off each other here, and the characters all feel like real people. The conversations are genuine, the humor hits because it's plausible, and the ages well because it's so grounded. Some movies just work. And there we have it. 16 hours, 8 rom-coms, one moron. I'm still not a romantic, but now I'm better equipped to date in the 90s. All I need now is a time hole. I hope you enjoyed this episode and will join me for the next stop on this crazy train. You can send me suggestions for themes to watch at octemberfestcast@gmail.com or complain about how I got all of these movies wrong at octemberfest.substack.com. Remember, stalking is not romantic. And until next time, keep it covered. Or don't. Your kids, your problem.